And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law.
Hello, Judge Walton, let us on that beat. Hello, Judge Walton, you're our court of last resort.
Hey, and welcome to The Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer. Great that you're with us here on CL 650. And today we're speaking with Joe Murphy, QC of MurphyBattista in downtown Vancouver. And from the Kelowna office, he's actually here in Vancouver. Nice of you to join us, is Bill Dick. How's the weather in Kelowna?
Sunny and warm.
Yeah?
Yeah, always sunny and warm in Kelowna.
So the wine is always flowing in the K-Town, right?
That's right.
All right, so we have an interesting show today. And this is, I think, something that affects everybody because almost everybody has a car when it comes to how much we pay in premiums and fraud around people making claims against ICBC. And if you've looked through the newspaper, watched television, or listened to radio stations like CI, you've heard ICBC advertising about fraud. And Joe, maybe you can fill us in on what the campaigns are basically saying and what you think what's really going on here.
Well, Zach, what the campaigns are saying, and it's pretty obvious, is they're saying we, ICBC, and you, the motoring public in BC, have a huge problem with fraud, and it's costing us all a fortune, and we have to do something about this. So that's really the message that comes through. You have the TV ads, you have the radio ads, and you have ads in the paper. Fraud is a problem for all of us. So there's no question that fraud is an issue, and when ICBC pays out $1, your dollar and mine, in premiums, they want to make sure they're paying it where it should be paid and for what it should be paid.
And this is something that the public can get behind because they think, well, if they're cracking down, that's good because that's going to save me money on my premiums. And we're going to get in a little bit later about ICBC helping to top up the coffers of the provincial government in terms of MSP. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But you're an expert. You're both experts in this field. You've been, Bill, how long have you been involved with this type of law, personal injury?
Well, personal injury, I've been doing it for over 20 years. But initially, I was doing it on the insurance defense side, not just acting on behalf of injured plaintiffs. And so part of what I would do on the insurance defense side is I would scrutinize claims, and some claims were fraudulent, and we would defend on the basis that they were people who would perpetrate fraud. So I've seen it on both sides.
Yeah, so the two of you have many, many years of experience in this. Yeah. What do you think the percentage is of fraud out there? You think it's high, as ICBC would have you imagine?
Well, Zach, let me answer it this way. ICBC's been in business since 1972. Fraud has been an issue or a problem for the insurance industry for 100 years, 200 years. So the question is, if ICBC says fraud is such a huge problem today, how did they allow that to happen? And really, ICBC pays out money for two things. They pay out money for damage to cars, and they have a system of checking a car and checking the parts and making sure there's no old damage. And they pay out money on injury claims, and for every 100 injury claims in BC, ICBC settles more than 99. So they investigate the claims, they come up with a number that is agreeable to the person injured, and the claim is settled for that amount.
So you're saying only 1% of you go to court?
Less than 1%, yeah. And when you go to court, the judge or jury, ICBC has a choice of having a jury, is there to make sure the amount paid is the right amount, not too much and not too little. So the idea that somehow today fraud is this huge problem just makes no sense. What's ICBC been doing since 1972? And I can tell you that they're careful when they fix a car that the right amount is paid, not too much. They're careful when they settle a claim that they're not paying out too much. And when you can't agree with them on what's paid out, it goes to court, but that's less than 1 in 100. So is fraud a problem in the system? Yes. Is there dishonesty in the system? Yes. Is it this huge problem that ICBC says is costing $500 to $600 million a year? Of course not. Well, because ICBC would have done something about it last year or last decade or in 1980.
So how do they come up with this? ICBC has a number of $100 to $150 per year for each insured vehicle, times all of the vehicles on the road in British Columbia, to an annual cost of $400 million to $600 million per year. So how do they come up with that $100 and $150 per vehicle?
Yeah, Zach, I had a trial where ICBC called someone from their fraud division, very knowledgeable person, and he got on the stand and gave these numbers to the jury. And when it was
because he's an expert, they don't question
well,
him.
you assumed he knew what he was talking about. He sure seemed to. And when I got up and I say, well, where did these numbers come from? He really couldn't say. He did say they've never done a study on fraud. They've never done a study to attempt to identify fraud or cost it out. There's no studies underway to do that. And he, as one of the senior people in this department, had never suggested to ICBC that they undertake such a study. So I said, well, where in the world do you get this number? And his answer was the Insurance Bureau of Canada estimates that 10 to 15% of monies paid out by an insurance company are fraudulent.
And how do they make up that number? Have they done a study?
I don't know, but ICBC hasn't been asleep at the switch since 1972. This is an issue. It's always been an issue, but to suggest that this is somehow a new, big, looming problem is simply dishonest.
It could be argued that the tens of or hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars they'd be spending on paying for advertising could be used to reducing the cost.
Well, there's a good reason why ICBC would spend millions of dollars on this fraud campaign.
What's that?
I think primarily because they want people to think that the cost in the system are because there's a lot of fraudulent claimants out there, and they don't want people to look carefully at the way ICBC operates. They operate as a very good and a very efficient insurance company.
Well, you've been on record as you think it's the best insurance program in North America, right?
I've dealt with maybe 100 private insurers in ICBC, and overall ICBC's better company to deal with. They're better run. They have a great system.
So what don't they want the light pointed at?
Well, Zach, when ICBC was established, the NDP government that brought it in said, we want to set up an insurance program for everybody in BC that runs at a break-even basis and is transparent. And that was the way it did run until 2010. And in 2010, ICBC had almost $600 million in its pocket. That was the profit it had made to that point on selling optional insurance coverage. Mm-hmm. And what ICBC said to the government is, we want to rebate this back to our policyholders.
Well, I remember over the years I have received checks from them for certain things, right?
Anyways, the government said, no, we don't want you paying that money back. And the government changed the law such that that amount, and this is in 2010, $576 million, got paid to the government.
As general revenue.
Yes.
As general revenue.
Yes. Now, I don't have any problem with money going into the government because they provide health care and education and services to everyone, and that costs money. Mm-hmm. But to have a program that is suggesting that these fraudulent claimants are behind the rising cost of insurance simply doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
So you're thinking it's a kind of a don't look here because what we're going to do is raise your premiums. Well, it's all because of this fraud. Basically, instead of saying we really need more for general revenue. Yes. Do you think it's going? Do you think these insurance premiums are helping the bottom line of the provincial government?
Well, what's happening, Zach, and the nice thing is when you get the ICBC annual statements every year, they show you where the money went to. So in 2010, $576 million got paid by ICBC to the provincial government. That was premium dollars.
And that was
2011, $101 million. 2012 was an election year, so nothing got paid. Mm-hmm. 2013, $230 million.
That's a lot of money.
2014, $130 million. And the estimate for last year, 2015, is $130 million. But if you total that up since 2010, that comes to almost $1.2 billion. That's the premium dollars. That money's going to the government, and as I say, I don't have a problem because they have to provide services for everybody. But to somehow start suggesting through an expensive ad campaign that the reason your rates are going up soon is because we've got fraud in the system is simply dishonest.
Well, there have been, and the reason why the ICBC can play on these in the public is because we have had stories of fraudulent rings of doctors and chiropractors being involved, and groups of people banging into each other and making claims, and people making dozens of trips to the doctor and claiming they can't work, and siphoning money out of the system. So there have been some high-profile situations like that. So for them to make that leap and suggest that there's a lot of fraud going on, the average consumer would just say, "Oh, okay, I can understand that."
Well,
Yeah.
it's all in the packaging and the message that's being sent. ICBC publishes their top 10, best frauds of the year for people to read and roll their eyes about. And certainly, as Joe and I say, there is fraud in the system. It's just whether it's as prevalent as the message that's being communicated. And I know that, in terms of my own experience, we deal with people all the time, thousands of people. And in my experience, most of the people who have legitimate injuries aren't fraudulent at all. And my clients who talk to me and see this ad campaign with the suggestion that everyone's exaggerating their claims so they can get more money, they're outraged by it because they're legitimately hurt.
And it takes time out of their life to go through the process, to engage attorneys to help them be represented against ICBC. It's not like somebody wakes up in the morning and says, "That's my line of work. I'm going to go and try and rip off ICBC." I'm sure there are people, but not a lot. Not the average person going to work every day.
Yeah, Zach, 2/3 of the people in BC injured in car accidents don't hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
So they deal with ICBC directly. 1/3 hire lawyers. But again, ICBC settles more than 99 out of 100 cases after carefully examining any case. And you talk about the frauds that have gone on, the multiple accidents, the gang that gets together and they take turns running into one another. Those were frauds. Those were all identified by ICBC, and those people are out of business. I'm not saying there's no fraud today, but what I'm saying is it's not this huge problem that this advertising campaign is suggesting, and when your premiums go up, it's because of the fraud. It's not because of the fraud. It's in part because of the huge amounts that is being paid by ICBC to the government. Now, Zach, I gave you some numbers that came to $1.2 billion. That's not all.
Well, we're going to get into that. We're just going to take a quick break. We're talking about ICBC and their fraud campaign. You've heard here on the radio, seen in print and on television. We're speaking with Joe Murphy, QC from MurphyBattista in downtown Vancouver, and from the Kelowna office, Bill Dick joining me in studio. We'll continue the conversation on The Law Show next here on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.